All right, so it's recorded now. Cool, let's get started. Um, so normally I do have another introduction slide. I don't have it today. I just think we have a lot to cover. But real quick, my name is Marty Krimmel. I'm part of the Amazon Music team here, run a metadata operations team on the catalog team. And I'm also one of the original founders of the Real Estate at Amazon. So there's a few of us on the Real Estate at committee. If you guys haven't, check out our wiki. We have a broadcast channel. We're trying to put on different events like these ones, bring in both internal as well as external speakers. So if you know anyone within Amazon that you think would be a good fit, feel free to kind of message me and the Real Estate at committee. If anyone from the committee is here, feel free to drop that email in the chat. But yeah, super excited for you all to be here. I'm going to try to do these intro to real estate investing sessions, maybe like once a month, once every other month, depending on time. But I think it's super, super important. We have a group now that's over 2,000 people. So beginning of the year, we were like at 1,000, and before that it was just a few hundred. So we've really grown quite significantly, and I think there's a large population, large chunk of that group that is just getting started. And then there's some that are really way ahead of the game. So we try to bring those people in as well. And then there's a lot of people that are kind of in between. But I think the large majority is really just kind of trying to get started with investing and with real estate. So that's what these sessions are for. So let's jump in it. Second here. Make sure that. Okay, cool. So what I want to start out with is something less real estate related, but I think really one of the most important things, because I work with a lot of people, get a lot of questions, and every week someone's kind of coming up and um, asking how do you get started. I think to me one of the number one important things is really to think about your vision, who you want to be, like your identity and your why, right? Because real estate investing, just like a lot of other things in life, isn't always easy, right? There's challenges that will come up. And so really asking yourself some of these questions: what is your vision? Who do you get to be in this lifetime? What's possible this year? And what are the action steps that you need to take right now are super important. I do the same with and connects I have with my team here. Two graphics that I really, really like, and some of the mastermind groups that I'm part of that are also real estate related and some not. They talk about this as well. So I want to share this real quick. One, not sure how many of you know this kind of wheel of life, but I'm a big believer. Beginning of the year, you really figure out kind of in this particular scenario, it's like shading from 1 to 10, like where in these different areas of your life are you at. So for example, real estate is a big one that you want to get better. Maybe it's that finance area. Maybe today it's a 5, but you really want to get to an 8, right? So it's kind of setting the initial baseline of where you are today, and then taking the action steps to get where you want to go, and writing down your goals. And the other piece that I really like is this emotional cycle of change. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but this will happen all the time in different scenarios. But I find it really applicable in real estate investing as well. And I just got a property recently that I closed on, and I even go through these stages. And so real quick, we don't have a ton of time to dive into in detail, but it's kind of this idea of when you start anything new, right? You start with this uninformed optimism. You're like, hey, I'm ready to invest in real estate. I'm ready to go. I'm excited about it. And then as you get into it, maybe it takes you like a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two, and you haven't really found that property that you're looking for. You get into this informed pessimism, stage 2, and you're like, this is kind of hard, right? It's not as easy as when I first, maybe even after this presentation, we're like, this sounded like I can do this. But then you get into the stage where like, this is difficult. A little bit, couple more weeks in, you're like, hey, I'm in this valley of despair. Like I myself with this property I'm at the moment, um, I am. It's a big like rehab, and I'm a bit in this stage where I'm like, wow, there's there's a lot more pieces to the remodel than I had initially anticipated. So you're at that point where like, I don't know if I can do this. That's where a lot of people quit, right? So people that just trying to start like with finding a property, they get to a stage 3 where it's like, this is really hard. I'm really struggling. I'm not finding what I was hoping for, and then you kind of quit and you go back to your your initial ways. But that's really where you have to push through. So when you think about finding properties, investing, really anything in life, any change that you're making to your current life, that is the stage where you really have to push through, because eventually you get to that stage 4 where it's like you're starting to see some results. Like maybe you got your first property under contract and you're like, wow, this is really working, right? And you get to that informed optimism where you're like, yeah, this makes sense. And then you keep going and you keep scaling and you get to like the stage 5 success and fulfillment. So I love this kind of graphic. I shared a lot with my team, as I said. Keep that in the back of your mind as you start on your real estate investing journey. Okay, so what's a little bit of my story? So I've been investing since about 2017. Started with a my own personal kind of residence here, a condo in Kent, Washington. So I'm in Seattle. Which, by the way, drop in the chat where you're chiming in from. Always kind of love to see. I know we're all over as part of this group. So say hi to everyone. Atlanta, Bremerton, Seattle, Austin, Linwood, Oakland, Seattle, Austin, Dallas, Seattle, Sammamish. Nice. All right. All over the map. Heavy in Washington, which is not surprising, but looks like all over coast to coast. Philly, cool. Well, yeah, welcome, especially if you've never been on any of these meetups. Super excited to have you here. So I basically started with my own personal residence, and then 2018, so not really that long ago, right? It's about 5 years, a little over 5 years, when I purchased my first investment property. And from there, I kind of did the second one, and then I started kind of doing this thing called house hacking. We'll talk a little bit more about it, and I've done a session on that as well, and I'll do more. But one of the things that I want to just point out here too, it's like you don't necessarily need 1,000 units or 500 units. I was on a call this morning, and it's also part of Mastermind, and the guy was like, "Hey, I own 500 units, and I just can't find anyone that's at my level." And there is these groups, and even within Amazon, right? Within the real estate at Amazon group, you'll find people that are at that level. But my point is that you don't necessarily have to be that if you don't want to, or if you're like, that's not really my goal, I don't have time. So I don't necessarily have a ton of properties, but I've done it pretty consistently over, the last 5 years. So overall, kind of continuing a bit with my stories. I used to own 7 properties and like 20 doors across Washington and Germany, where I'm originally from. So that's where I was born. I sold a couple, so now it's about 5 properties and 15 doors, so 15 units um, across the portfolio. I'm also an agent, so licensed, so I help people as well buy and sell properties, friends, family, clients, anyone that needs help. So there, I've done about 10 million in real estate. As I said, one of the founding members. If I'll show you guys on the next slide, but the original one was Justin Camera. Follow him on Instagram. He's amazing, has so much knowledge. He's like one of my kind of mentors and inspiration. Really, really great person. He actually became financially free and then quit his Amazon job about maybe a year and a half ago. And we're still in touch. And he's going to be on one of the meetups at the end of February. And we're actually going to try to do that in person too. So if anyone on the committee is here, if you can answer some of these questions in the chat, would be amazing. Otherwise, I'll try to get to them. And at the end of the session, use the raise your hands tool, and I'll get to any questions that we can. Then the team I'm on is called the House Hack Team of Seattle. So we're all investors, own property. There's 7 of us in total. We do monthly events, happy hours that I've sent out to the Amazon group as well. super informative, just a lot of knowledge sharing, not a lot of good connections. Some people show up just because they want to meet people, right? A lot of people move new to Seattle or new cities, and so we do these meetups. And some of them are like, "Hey, are you interested in real estate?" They're like, "Yeah, a little bit, but I really want to just meet people." So come out to if you just kind of want to meet people. There will be a next one, I think, in a couple of weeks. I'll make sure to inform the group. And there's lots of properties between us, 50 properties brokered over 100 million in real estate and over 70 transactions. I also love to travel, so kind of my passions are real estate, traveling, music. Love the Amazon Music team. Shout out to anyone that's on here from there. And cold plunging. So that's also a big piece that I do. Can you guys hear me? Let me see. Looks like there was a little bit of connection issue. Okay. Um, awesome. So yeah, here's a couple of pictures from some of the world travels. As I said, my family's in Germany. I try to see my brother over there in England. My nieces and nephews in Germany. I took my dad to Scotland. Suki, yes, that's right, Chris. Suki's there, my dog. The top right here, that's Justin actually. So when we were talking about the other kind of original founder here, we met in Qatar at the World Cup. So he's representing the US there. I'm in my German jersey. And then on the bottom, some of the clients and friends that I've helped over the last couple of years. Just really, really exciting always to help the people teach and really do a similar thing of what I'm doing. So, all right, let's jump into the real estate. So why investing? For most part, I've just invested in residential real estate. We'll go over a couple other options that there are, but this is going to focus more heavily on residential. So one of the things that real estate is a tangible and versatile asset class, right? So it's something you can touch, you can change, right? There's different things you can do. You can add value, you can fix things, right? You can have different strategies. You can directly influence the value. So when you hear people buy a fix and flip, or they're like, "Hey, I'm buying a fixer upper," people do that generally because they can get it at a lower cost, right? A lower price point. Repair, add a kitchen, add a bathroom, fix things up, and then add value. So you have the ability to directly influence the value that way. Historically, it's a very stable asset class, and you have long-term appreciation potential. And it's just a great, another diversification benefit and a hedge against inflation. Generally, as inflation goes up, the price of real estate go up. And then one of the quotes here, from Jeff, everybody knows him. If we think long term, we can accomplish things that we couldn't otherwise accomplish. Pretty simple, right? But still something that I really want y'all to remember. This is a long-term game. So I get this all the time where people say, "Well, what if the market crashes, this year or next year?" Right? And we'll look at a graphic in a moment. These things can happen, right? We all don't have a crystal ball. There's a lot of uncertainty in the economy. So real estate isn't immune to that. But if you have a long-term view, you will be successful, in my opinion. So some of the graphs here, and one second. Some of the graphs here I wanted to share. On the left, this is the median home price in Washington State since 1995. So you can see it's pretty steadily increased until about 2007, 2008. Most everyone is probably aware when the big financial crisis, subprime mortgage bubble hit, and prices dropped, right? But take a look, where it's gone from there. Right? It's continued to go up. So yes, if you bought in 2007 at the peak, and then you sold in 2009, 10, 11, you probably lost money, right? But if you hung on, you can see there your home prices now have more than doubled in some instances. So to the point of, this is really a long-term game. Unless you fix and flip and you're trying to quickly make money, you have to have a little bit of a different strategy. But if you're a buy and hold investor, which is the strategy that I mainly use, over the long term, you will be successful. The next one is kind of the interest rates, right? That's a big topic at the moment. Everyone's talking about the rise in interest rates. I wanted to put this one up so you can see historically, because everyone's like, wow, it's so high right now. The interest rate is really, really high compared to 2%, right? 3%. Like it's more than double at the moment, right? 6.5. It's been up as high as 8. But again, if you look at it historically, some probably of your parents back in the 80s, it was up to like over 17.5%. So we've seen really, really high interest rates, but they've gone down for the most part, right? Up until about a year and a half ago. One thing I do want to point out is a graph that I found below that although I think that the interest part isn't as big of a deal, the affordability has definitely changed. So it's become more and more expensive to buy real estate and more unaffordable, right? So that graph below kind of shows the median household income hasn't kept up with the median home prices. So if you see there, kind of in the 1970s, it was pretty close. In the 1980s, there was a little bit of a gap over here, but now that gap is significant, right? So we're just not, the income isn't rising at the same level as the real estate prices are going up, and I think that definitely does create an issue, an affordability problem. So you have to be more and more creative, really, to be able to afford real estate at the moment than maybe you had just a few years ago, especially when it comes to investing. Okay, so why do I think it's one of the best, if not the best, financial investment? So one of the things that we often talk about is kind of the 4 wealth pillars of real estate. So a lot of times, let's say you believe, you invest in stocks, and I also have stock investments. But when you take the two, and we had Liz and Ryan, who are really awesome, like rockstar Amazon investors here a couple weeks ago. He wrote a cool blog post about it. But the benefit of real estate versus something like stock is that you have these kind of 4 wealth pillars and more, but these are like the main ones. One is cash flow, right? So if you invest right, you're basically able to have the property pay you. So we'll go a little bit over analysis in a bit, but cash flow is really after all your mortgage, property, your property taxes, your insurance, everything like that is paid for, and you factor in expenses like repair, maintenance, capex. Whatever is left over after that is your cash flow. The second one is kind of tax advantages. So through interest deduction, mortgage interest deductions, depreciation, those are the 2 big ones that really will save you money long term on your taxes. Third one is equity buildup, right? So as you have someone else pay your mortgage, pay for part of the property, your loan balance is going to go down year over year, right? When you start out, it's only going to be a little bit, right? But 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that one it's going to shrink more and more. And someone else, if you're investing, right? If you're not paying for it, someone else is helping you pay that loan down. And the last one is property appreciation, right? So as we looked at that chart just before, over time, historically, the real estate prices have gone up. Not always, but again, on a big picture, they have increased. What are the different types of property?
Hey, Marty, would you be sharing this deck?
So one of the, just a quick graphic here. Again, we're going to focus more on residential, but there's much more, right? You can invest in many different areas. Besides what's under residential is usually like your houses, duplex, triplex, quadplexes, townhomes, things like that. You got commercial, right? Office, hotels, restaurants. There's a lot of like land type investing. vacant land, farms, and then industrial, right? Warehouses, distribution centers, and so on. So they all have kind of different numbers you look at, different regulations, but I've mostly focused on residential. But there's a commercial real estate group at Amazon too, and we also bring in speakers that are experts in that field. So if you want to learn more about it, we will make that happen. What are some of the different investment strategies? So again, we talked about a little bit buy and hold. What that means, you'll hear sometimes the acronym LTR, long-term rental. It's basically you acquire a property, you hold it long-term, right? You rent it out, you get rental income, and it appreciates. MTR, if you ever heard that, is midterm rental. One of my good friends, Sarah Weaver, she was on our show here on our meetup a few months back. She wrote a book for BiggerPockets, 30-day stay. Really, really good book. Talks about how can you use your property to rent out to travel professionals, travel nurses, things like that. If you heard the term STR, that's generally Airbnb, Vrbo, short-term rentals. Fix and flip. So that's again, if you buy a distressed property, you want to buy it under value, you renovate it, and then hopefully you sell it for a profit, or you hang on to it and you rent it. One of the acronyms, I didn't put that on here, but you might hear that a lot, is called BRRRR. That stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. We won't dive into like big detail here, but it's a good strategy of how people reuse their money. So they basically buy a distressed property, fix it up, then refinance it, pull out the cash. So hopefully it's worth more than what they initially acquired it for. Refinance it, pull out their cash, and do it again. So if you see investors sometimes use that strategy to keep using their cash. Wholesale, so it's when you contract properties at a discount and you assign them to another buyer. We had some people that do that on here as well, and if you're interested in that, we'll have more there. And then land development. So I mentioned this a little bit ago. My favorite strategy, especially as you're starting out, is house hacking. So house hacking, and I did a whole session on it. I won't do it here, but what house hacking is in essence, you purchase a property, you live in it, and then you rent part of it out. So that at the core is the idea of house hacking. I'm from Europe originally. They will always say that we've been doing it for generations, but they do it less there with owning property. It's quite common, on the rental side. But what are some of the advantages of house hacking versus purely buying an investment? The first one is you get to purchase real estate for low money down. So a lot of times I have people come up to me like, "Hey, I just don't have that much money," and I'm like, "Okay, let's talk about it, right?" And it's because there's this belief that you need 20% or 25% down, but you really don't if you own or occupy a property. So for house hacking, if you're a veteran, you can get in as little as 0%. For anyone else, you can do it as little as 3.5% or 5%, 10%. So that's really one of the biggest benefits, I think. So if you don't have a ton of money, but you still want to invest in real estate and you're willing to own or occupy it, a really good strategy. Another one is a lower interest rate. So generally, if you just purely buy an investment, you're like, "Hey, I live in Seattle and I want to buy in Kansas," right? You're going to have to put 20 to 25% down, and your interest rate will be higher than it will be if you own or occupy the home. Expenses paid for by tenants, right? So that's in general a benefit of investing. If you do it right, you rent it out, a lot of your expenses will be covered through the rent you receive. If you do it right, you can pay less for owning a home than renting. So I've helped kind of people that Seattle's a very expensive market. You can pay easily $4,000, $5,000 a month in rent. So I've had friends and clients that I've worked with, and they paid $5,000 a month, but now they own a home in the same location where they were renting previously, and they pay much less or nothing in some cases, depending on the type of house hack. Cash flow and build equity. So we talked about that. And then another really cool thing is if you house hack, by lending law, you have to owner occupy for 12 months. Okay, so you have to stay in the property for 12 months. But after that, you can move out and you can do it again. So you could repeat it and pretty quickly build up your investing portfolio. And this is why, for me, it's the strategy that I've used a lot. And I really, especially for newer investors, but honestly for anyone, like I don't know how many people on this call know Brandon Turner. He's the Bigger Pockets, main pod, or used to be the podcast host. We've had him on here before. Super well known in the real estate field. He lives in Hawaii now, and he house hacks like a $2 million home. So he's just got a ADU in the back, or basically a separate house in the back, and then a basement unit. And he's super successful, but he still house hacks. So I think it's an amazing strategy that we will be able to dive into more as well if you have questions. What are some of the different income generating strategies? So these can work if you just buy investment, but as well as your house hack. Airbnb, most of you are familiar with that. Travel nurses, that's kind of the midterm rental. If you buy a property close to hospitals, I have friends that are super successful in that. You usually furnish the room, and then the great thing is that it's pretty much a guaranteed income. They work long hours, are just there to sleep and be in a nice place. So if you can kind of set it up that way, it's a great strategy. Rent by the room, that's one that I've done a lot. I really love rent by the room because you can provide very affordable housing to people, right? Like here in Seattle, you can rent a room from anywhere from 700 to, let's say, 1100 and up. But that's kind of like a range here, which a lot of people are like, wow, that's for a room. I'm like, yeah, it's expensive in Seattle, but when you do that and you include utilities, it's kind of a win-win, because if you have a big house, you rent out the rooms, it can work financially for you, but it also works for the tenant, right? Because they just can't find a place in Seattle that's a good, nice, safe place that's like $1,000 or $900 a month. Very difficult to find. Subdivision, so finding a property that you can subdivide, kind of adding value that way. Another really cool thing is storage. So something I've done for a couple of years now is you can actually rent out storage. It could be your bedroom, it could be a little shed that you have in the back. People will pay for that. The app that I use here is Neighbor. You can rent out your parking, right? So you have to check city regulations of how many vehicles are allowed on your property, but something I do as well. So parking is another thing. It's super expensive in Seattle, right? Like in downtown, if you have to pay $350, $400 a month, but someone offers a parking spot, say close to the airport for $100, it could be a win-win, especially if you're just not using your property in any other way, like the land. Sniff Spot and HipCamp, those are really cool. So I'm not sure how many of you have seen them or used them, but some people don't have the space for their dog, but there's people that do have the space, and you can rent your property on Sniff Spot and let dogs run around. Put rules and regulations on it, but really kind of cool idea. And then HipCamp, very affordable camping. So people rent out their backyards to people that want to just pitch a tent and save some money that way versus going to a bigger campsite or hotel and whatnot. Okay, so step one, right? If you want to kind of get started, for me, it all kind of starts at your financial planning and your budgeting. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, right, like, how am I going to buy this property? There's probably the number one book that people always recommend is Rich Dad Poor Dad, by Robert Kiyosaki, and he talks about this concept of like asking yourself, like, how can I afford it, right? It's a mindset shift. If you're like, I just can't afford this property, to figuring out like, how can you afford it? So it's really important. The traditional route is, getting a mortgage. So if you do that, making sure you have a good credit score, your debt to income ratio, so how much you make versus how much debt you have, and then getting a pre-approval. So really important if you want to invest, pay close attention to your finances, right? Like, don't put a bunch of stuff on your credit card that you're not paying off, right? Make sure you build up a good credit score. The better your credit score, the better your rate that you're able to get, and really do kind of a financial check on where you are. Think about the initial investment cost, right? There's a purchase price, there's closing costs, which generally vary anywhere from like 1 to 3% of the purchase price. And if you want to renovate, right? If you're buying a fixer-upper, you're going to have a renovation budget. Ongoing expenses. We'll talk about this in a little bit when it comes to analyzing properties. But you have recurring expenses, property taxes, insurance, utilities, right? Maintenance, CapEx. So there's ongoing expenses that you want to budget for, and have a reserve fund, right? Historically, for myself, I've been always like have a very high risk tolerance. So I kind of put a lot of the money into real estate. But then when COVID hit, right, and all of a sudden tenants aren't paying anymore, you need to have a way to still cover your payments, right? So make sure you have that. And one little graphic I want to put on here, again, BiggerPockets, I'll have resource links at the end of the presentation, but BiggerPockets is probably the #1 place where people start, the largest investment firm in the US. And they talk about these things like, in real estate, you don't have to have all three, but you have to basically have two, and you can find the other one. So the idea is here, maybe you don't have the money right now to invest, but can you build the knowledge, right? Can you really like educate yourself on real estate, and can you have the hustle? So can you be the one that's finding the deal? As long as I've been in it, one of the hardest thing is finding the deal, finding the good property. If you get really, really good at that, you can get into investing with very little to no money down over and over again. I know plenty of people that do it that invest almost no money in their deals. And that's because they're just really, really good at educating themselves on how to make a deal work. And they put in the work, they put in the hustle to do it. Next up, decide on your market, right? I get this question all the time. People asking me like, hey, what do you think about investing in Montana or in Michigan or in, Missouri? Everyone kind of has their own strategy. So I'll just give you a couple of things that I would look at if you're debating on where to invest in. Again, for me, my recommendation is always like, try to start in your own backyard, but sometimes it's not possible. For me, I started in New York, but not in New York City, but in Buffalo, New York, where at the time a duplex that needed some work, but it cost $115,000. There's no way you find a duplex in Seattle anywhere, even if it's not even a house. If it's just the land, there's no way you can find it for $115,000. But in Buffalo, you were able to. So I started there initially. This was me not being aware of the whole house hacking strategy that I mentioned earlier, because that's how I would have started if I knew, but you guys know now. But nevertheless, if you do decide to go out of state because for whatever reason you want to do it, you've seen people be successful, look at some of these criteria. So the population growth, crime rate, affordability, what are the landlord-tenant laws? Some states is very restrictive, others are more lenient. Washington generally a pretty tenant-friendly state, so that's why people sometimes leave here and invest in other states. What's the income? So a couple of graphics here. I like the 2023 U-Haul growth states. So where have people been moving in 2023? And you can see #1 is Texas, but Washington actually has seen a big inflow of people last year, so it's at #7. But that can be like a guidance for you on where to go. Median household income, right? So Again, Washington, where I live, is one of the highest ones. You can see there at 89, about $90,000 a year, compared to some of the other states. But use that as well as a guidance on where you want to go. Next step. So you figured out your market, you figured out kind of your budget and things like that. Next piece really is finding kind of an investor-friendly agent. And I really emphasize the investor-friendly part because there's tons of agents out there that don't know anything about investing. And one of the reasons why I ended up getting my license is because I would ask them, I'm like, hey, what's the cash flow on this property? Like, how do you analyze it? And they just didn't know. Like there's a lot of people weren't aware. And when I started kind of working with people, it was like they've interviewed 1, 2, 3, 4 people, and they just didn't quite get it. So I would really just highly recommend check with the group here. Like if you're like, hey, I'm ready to go invest in Seattle, you can reach out to me or anyone in the group. If you're like, hey, I want to invest in Michigan or wherever, like you can drop a question on the Slack channels that we can share you as well if anyone on the team is here. And just ask like, hey, is there anyone you recommend? Right? Is there anyone that you recommend that could help me? Go on BiggerPockets. That's how I started. I just wrote a blog post and I was like, hey, I want to invest in New York, in Buffalo, and you can actually see like how much are people participating in there, right? Like what type of investments do they have? So just make sure you through meetups, friends and family, or look at Google reviews, you find people that are already doing what you want to do. I think that's a big piece because those people will give you the guidance. Hopefully, there's a lot of people in the industry that are not great, so you might have to interview a few people, but we have a really great community here, right? We have over 2,000 people from all over. You can ask for help. That's I think my biggest thing. Ask for help. And these are a couple questions you can ask, right? Like how many properties do you own, right? Do you know how to analyze the deal? Do you know what the market is like, right? Can you tell me these things? And then like what value can they bring to you, right? Are they just like setting you on like what they call collections and you just get a bunch of houses, but they never take the time to talk to you, to explain to you how investing works, how analyzing properties work? There's a lot of agents like that, and that's not really a lot of value add to you, right? So think about the value that they can bring. And then can they connect you with the right people, right? Once you get the property, we talk about this in a minute, but you need a team, right? It's really to be successful. You need a team, and it kind of starts with the agent, the lender, contractors, property managers, other investors. As you do better and better and more, like you want to be in the world of people that are successful. It's kind of like this saying, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with. Same goes here, right? If you're around people that do more, that are 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 years ahead of where you are, you will get there as well. Property selection and analysis. So that's kind of your next step, right? You're figuring out how to analyze the properties, right? You're working with someone, you start looking at properties. Look for some of these hidden values that we talked about. So a lot of times a 1,200 or 1,000 square foot house that shows up as a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath probably has an extra bedroom that you can add or 2. So I've done that, purchasing a property and figuring out how can I add more value. So usually adding a bedroom, adding a bathroom are like great strategies that to increase the value. Can you buy the lot? So the first property or one of the properties I bought down in Tukwila, it's on a big 13,000 square foot lot. And for Tukwila, as long as the property is like a minimum of, I think it's like 12,700 or so square feet, then you can subdivide. So you're buying the house, but you're also buying the land. And so it's an overlooked value a lot of times, right? One of the strategies people use here now all the time is buying a home and then building what's called a DADU, a detached accessory dwelling unit, in the back. Huge strategy in Seattle because we have such limited space and such limited inventory. You just need to know what to look for. So in those cases, you can't build a DADU unless the lot size is a minimum of 3,200 square feet. So again, it comes back to kind of some of the educating piece and looking at properties in a way where, what can I do beyond just buying the property as is, right? And then areas that are appreciating, there's this saying, don't be the nicest house on the block, right? Like, don't buy that really, really nice house around all these houses that are not great. Do the opposite, right? You're trying to find basically the crappiest house, so to speak, on the really, really nice block, right? So you know that area is appreciating and will be higher in value. Run comparative market analysis. So if you're working with somebody, they should be able to help you with that, but really looking at what do properties sell for. And make running numbers a habit. I'm a big believer on habits. And if you want to be successful, be like, hey, my goal is to buy a property in the next 90 days. Kind of work backwards, right? Like Amazon, work backwards from that goal of like, what is kind of the next step and what are the habits that you need to implement to do that? Running numbers is huge. And then think through multiple exit strategies. So can you rent it? If you can't rent it, long term, can I Airbnb it? Can I, again, potentially sell it if I needed to quickly? And what are kind of the different strategies that you have? I'm going to speed it up here a little bit. I think it's been a while, but due diligence. So always inspecting properties, reviewing financials, evaluating rental income. Again, analyzing as many properties as you can. That's something you can do today. I'll show you a spreadsheet here in a minute that I use. Happy to share it. There's a BP Bigger Pockets calculator. I think they give you a limited amount of tries. But that's something you can do just on your own time. You can just say, you can set a goal like, hey, every day I'm going to analyze one property. You just go on Redfin, pick a property, you start running it through a calculator. So that's kind of a strategy, a habit you can do to start really getting into the world of investing. For rental demand, what I like to use is Rentometer. So that'll give you a quick high-level idea of the median and the average rent in that area. And here's kind of the spreadsheet that I use, that the team I'm on uses a lot. So I'll go through this. We got a little bit of time. Again, happy to share it and probably do like another session just on analyzing itself. But at the core here, in one moment. So the idea basically here is, you put in your purchase price, rehab costs if you have any, your closing costs. We factor in appreciation. That depends on your market, right? You don't want to use the same appreciation number for every market. But in Seattle, in the last 10 years, on average, it's been around 3 to 5%. If you look at it, even more recent, it's been in like the double digits. But you don't want to use the double digits, right? When it's only been a few years, try to use a kind of a 10-year, 20-year average. You can put in your details here. So what's your down payment? What's the interest rate? At the moment, 6.5%, between 6.5% and 7%. PMI, so that's your property mortgage insurance. If you put less than 20% down, then that is something that will roll into your loan. If you put more than 20% or more, then you won't have PMI. Your insurance, right? You're going to have homeowners insurance. Your property taxes, so important to factor those in. And some areas, they're super, super high. Like I was talking to someone in Chicago, and you can buy a home much, much cheaper than in Seattle, but the taxes are incredibly high. So then number 3 is you put your rental income in there. So how much do you think, based on the Rentometer or other research that you do, what do you believe you can rent the units for? And then in step 4, it kind of puts it all together. So you sometimes hear that acronym PITI, which is your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So all that added up together, plus your PMI, again, of less than 20%. And then this is where a lot of people, I think, get it wrong. Brandon Turner calls this thing like this phantom cash flow. So there's people that say, hey, I make $500 a month on my property. But what they don't factor in is vacancy, maintenance, and CapEx, utilities and property management if you use a property manager. So you want to factor these things in when you're analyzing properties, right? This stuff might not come up immediately. So you might have for 12, 24 months, only your PITI, right? Principal, interest, tax, insurance, and your rental income, and you're doing well. But then all of a sudden the hot water tank goes out, right? And you have to replace that. Or the furnace, or the tenants haven't taken great care of the property, right? So there's ongoing maintenance and CapEx. CapEx is capital expenditure. So those are your furnace, your roof, your bigger costs. So you want to factor those in when you look at properties, because otherwise you will get hit by that bill, and it's going to just suck out all the cash flow that you thought you were making. And then in this spreadsheet here, we kind of do a year 1 and year 5 analysis. And one of the big things now in the Seattle market, for example, it's really hard to cash flow. Like it's really, really difficult with the interest rates as high as they are. If you go back 5-10 years ago, or if you read books from 5 to 10 years ago, they say you should only buy a property if you're cash flowing at least $150 a month or $200 a month. That was at a time where interest rates were like 2, 3.5, 4%, not 6.5, 7%, right? Prices, as we looked at earlier, haven't really come down. So cash flow is difficult to get. But if you look at it more holistically, there's other ROI, return on investment numbers, that make real estate still, in my opinion, a worthwhile investment. So here, this one looks at like your year 1 appreciation. Again, depends on your market. Your loan pay down, right? We talked about that. The first year, right away, there will be a little bit of your loan that gets paid down by someone else. So you have to factor that in as a return on your investment, and then tax savings as well. And then year 5 really just, it's not an average on year 5. It's like, where would you be in year 5? Because historically, right, you're going to increase increase rents. Again, appreciation will continue to happen, loan pay down, all these things. So. All right, so once you analyze, the kind of next step is you make offers. So I did a quick screenshot here. This is the Washington State Residential Purchase and Sale Agreement. This was an offer that I made not too long ago, last year in September. I didn't get it, but this is again another habit that's really, really important. A lot of people are scared of making offers, and they're like, oh, I don't know. And when you've never ever done it, it can be super daunting. So I might do like a session on just making offers and contracts, because it can be daunting. But without diving like heavily into it, because I still wanted some room for questions. But it's not as scary as it seems, as long as you have what they call contingencies in there. So you can basically have clauses in your contract that let you get out of a contract potentially. So making offers, especially in a competitive market, is really, really important, because a lot of times that can be the difference between you getting the property and not getting the property. So getting comfortable with wherever you are with making offers, having someone that can walk you through it and explain to you how it works, really, really important for you to get a property under contract. Once you have it under contract, there's a lot of other things we could go over, but we don't really have time for it. But inspections is one of them. That's probably the biggest contingency. So you can actually have someone look at the property, an inspector, while it's under contract. Make sure things that you weren't aware of aren't gonna be an issue in the property. So maybe when you got it under contract, you're like, hey, I didn't know the roof was leaking, but you had an inspection, and the inspector is like, yeah, your roof is leaking. You need a new roof. It's gonna be $12,000, right? Like that's something you want to know before you end up closing on it. And with things like inspection contingencies, you can do that. But let's say you go through it, you get it under contract, and you close on it. Then it's kind of deciding for you, how are you what are you gonna do next, right? How are you gonna rent it? So the kind of next step after you have it under contract, or sorry, after you have it closed, would be, am I gonna hire a property manager? Am I gonna self-manage? Both work. One of the questions I get a lot, how much is property management? Generally, it's between 8 to 10% of your gross rents. So when you do hire somebody, they will take that every month. I have a property manager for some of mine. I think it's worth it. But I also know people like, again, Liz and Ryan, who were a couple weeks ago, they have 12 properties and they self-manage them all. So it's definitely possible. Everything depends really on your situation. So when we talk again about like your why and your vision, right, think about what works best for your particular situation. If you want to do it yourself as well, like tenant sourcing, Facebook has been great for me. Amazon, right? We have the For Rent alias, Craigslist, Zillow, and just your network. So one of my recent like roommates and tenants, she's a good friend from one of my best friends. So you never know where your tenants come from. Become a really great interviewer, right? If you've ever done interviewing at Amazon, we're very peculiar about how we interview. Use those skills when you find tenants. And Avail is a great platform, and I'll link to it for self-managing. Lastly, monitor and optimize, right? So as you have it running, don't just forget about it. I even fall into that trap sometimes. So I put on, you have like a property QBR, right? A quarterly business review. Like treat your investments like a business, right? Look at regular review the performance. How's it doing? Make adjustments. Are the properties cash flowing? Do they need improvements? Can you maximize something on the Airbnb side? Like I recently just looked at all my utility bills that I've kind of just set it and forget it in a way, and was like, oh, this seems kind of high, right? Like, can I do something more energy efficient? So look at that. And then we talked about adding value. And then lastly, also give back to the community and others, right? Yesterday, we had our first in-person happy hour. It's like here in the middle. And that's really, really important. I believe Amazon does a lot of like volunteering sessions too. So I try to join those and do those. But as you kind of learn and educate, go help your peers and your fellow investors out. Here's the resources. I'm happy to share them. BiggerPockets, Real Estate at Amazon, right? There's a few books that I really, really like. If you're looking for kind of that data that we talked about for other out-of-state investing, City Data is a good spot to go to. Avail for self-management. And the last four here are kind of Seattle-based ones. WARI is a really good Facebook group of thousands of investors in Washington State, the Real Estate Investors Association of the Puget Sound, Meetup. So there's, like I said, my team also does monthly happy hours that we put on Meetup. And we have a blog as well where we talk about all these different things. So happy to share them if you're interested. And that's it. So if you want to connect, message, Slack me, chime me, Instagram, anything. So yeah, thanks all. So with that, hopefully this was helpful, and I'm happy to take a few questions. I know I took quite a while here. All right, let me see here. And also, if a few of you would want to pop on video, that would be cool. I try to, promote this to other people as well, so we can get more speakers. But yeah, let me take some Priyanka. Am I saying that right? Priyanka Surana. Do you have a question? Oh, there's a quip. Okay. Let's take some someone just popped up. I'll take some from the queue and then equip. What about Yashin Agrawal?
Hi, Marty. Joshin here. Thank you so much for the session. Uh, I will look in to the financial analysis and how to analyze the property. Maybe that will also answer this question. But now that I have you, I am interested in a house hack. But a lot of times when I go into property details like R6 zoning and all those details, I want to check if it's already having permits. Most of the time, I don't see those permits. Like for ADU, it has a cross against it. Can you put in a permit and get it, or the property has to have the permits already for you to rent out a ADU or additional whatever studio it comes with?
Yeah. Yeah, and so you're coming in really quiet. I don't know if it's on my end, but the question is around getting permits, and do you have to get permits? Is that?
Yes, on ADUs, especially around house hacks. I'm sorry, my connection is weaker. It's on my side for sure.
Yeah, on ADUs, house hacks. Yeah. So ideally, you get permits, especially if you make if you build an ADU for sure. If you make major structural changes, electrical usually requires permits. So if you want to do it right, I always say get permits. Now, that said, there's a lot of people that don't, right? There's a lot of people that do unpermitted ADUs in the basement, and you certainly can do that. For example, people, if you just do a living space in the ADU, so you don't have a kitchen, you don't have a stove or anything like that. It's just a living space. You can do it without getting permits. But once you add in the kitchen, bathroom, you want to get permits on that generally. But to save time and save money, a lot of people don't do that. Can you still sell a property unpermitted? Let's say it has an unpermitted ADU. Yep, you can. You're definitely allowed to do that. The agent should disclose that. One of the issues you can run into with unpermitted stuff is, let's say you have a fire, insurance might not cover it if it's unpermitted. So I always recommend getting permits, but there's definitely a lot of people that don't do it. Does that help? Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, there's a whole quip. Let me take some of these. The deck will be shared, and the recording will also be on our broadcast channel. If someone from the team could drop that in the chat, that'd be great. We linked the blog post. Is house hacking the same as paying guest concept? Not sure that I know the paying guest concept. Ashutosh, do you wanna if you want to jump on, maybe I can help answer it. I'm not familiar with the paying guest concept is. All right, maybe they dropped. I'm gonna go to the next one here. When purchasing properties, how do you shield, reduce liability, your primary income, and your house? Yeah, so definitely one of the kind of easiest things probably to do. A lot of people talk about LLCs, like should I get an LLC? Really depends on your situation. I would say, get your CPA's advice, get your legal advice on it. I personally don't have an LLC, but I do know people that, especially when it comes to partnerships and stuff, you definitely want to have that. And you want to have very clear what they call like operating agreements spelled out. If you're just starting out, make sure you talk to your insurance company as far like, hey, this is what I'm doing. You can have your tenants get renters insurance. Another thing to do if you need extra coverage, like really when some people have a lot of potential assets, right? So you want to make sure if you have a lot of assets that you are properly protected. An easy one is umbrella insurance, umbrella policy. I have that. It generally gives you like $1 million, $2 million of extra like liability insurance in case something does happen, and it's fairly inexpensive, like $20, $25 a month, but it gives you added protection. So that's what I would say. So after a year in your house, when you move and get another primary property, how do you pass the liability to the LLC? Yeah, so if that's a good link here. Thanks for anyone that put that in. I've personally haven't done that, so I would either refer to kind of legal counsel there or check out that link. Can you share your spreadsheet? Yep, absolutely. I'm happy to drop that in here so you guys can start running numbers. One of the big things is just make a copy of it. So I'll give you like viewer access, but then if you can make a copy for yourself, then you can start running numbers with it. How do you manage your rental property out of state? So I don't own them anymore, but what I did was I went through a property manager management company. He was actually the one that I initially reached out to on BiggerPockets, and then he helped connect me with an agent who then found me the property. But then once I had it, I had them manage it, and they charged about 9% of the gross rents, and it was amazing. I mean, even during COVID, when it was really, really difficult, and I haven't jumped into some of the horror stories, but they handled everything, so it was well worth the 9% of gross rents every month. So find a really good property manager. Again, the interviewing skills. Try to interview 2 or 3. Ask them some of the similar questions that I put on the agent slide, and that's what I would recommend there. Out of state and within states. I think that's maybe regarding the property management. Yeah, you can, the same would apply really, whether that's in state or out of state. Some of these resources that I linked at the end that I'm happy to share, I can drop them in here as well. They like if you go, for example, on the Facebook group or you go on BiggerPockets, you can find pretty easily a lot of property managers, and then just interview them, ask for referrals, references, things like that. How do you manage the risk of renting out your property to tenants who end up squatting? Good question. So investing, right, as we talked about, does come with risks. So certainly that is a risk that you face. I think you can really minimize it by running good background checks, right? Income checks, calling the references. Like whenever I get a new tenant, I run a full background check. I verify all their income, and then I ask them for at least 3 to 5 references, and they'll be like professional references, friends and family. And the ones that I love the most are the ones from landlords, former landlords, or roommates, right? And I call every single one of them every time. And they might not pick up on Monday. I'll call them again on Tuesday. I'll call them again on Wednesday. Like, I really want to know this person that I'm going to rent to, they've already lived somewhere else, right? And the people that they've lived with, the people that they work for, the other landlords that they had, they will tell you, how they are. Now, does that mean you will never ever have a squatter? No, but you're going to be able to heavily minimize your risk that way. Okay, I'll take a few more questions here. Let me see. How do you analyze of building an ADU, considering you may not break even for a few years? Yeah, good question. So there is a separate kind of calculator that I have that we use for that. So you do want to then make sure, obviously you're factoring in the build cost of that, right? Whether you get a construction loan on it, whether you finance it through a HELOC. If you do it cash, it's a lot easier, but it does change your analysis a little bit. So yeah, we can kind of go over that maybe in a separate session as well. Yep, that's correct. Do you ever had an experience with a tenant? How did you deal with it? Yeah, I did have during COVID. I had a tenant who moved in May, and then this was in New York, and then New York said, you know, you no longer have to pay. So then they literally stopped paying. They paid for 1 month and then never paid again for the next 12 months. And at that point, there wasn't much I could do. So even afterwards, you could go to, usually for these cases, like small claims court. But generally, especially at that time, the backlog in the courts was like 3-4 years. So the amount of time and effort to try to recoup wasn't worth it. So the best thing you can do there is do as much upfront work when we talked about the interviewing piece as you can to really try to minimize it. Once it does happen, you can get, you know, courts involved, legal involved, sheriffs involved, but especially in very tenant friendly states, it can be difficult. But there's one strategy that's an interesting one, is they call it like cash for keys. So you can basically say, hey, I'm going to give you, let's just say $1,000 if you leave. That's something that people do. And a lot of times I've seen scenarios where people that are squatting will take that. So that's an option among others if you do, because legal processes are of course lengthy. But my biggest recommendation is just try to just really do your due diligence on the front end. Okay, maybe I'll take one more here, and feel free to reach out to me as well. Obviously, I can't get to everything, but let's see. Are the days of buy and hack no longer a good option? Joseph, maybe can you give a little bit more detail? Okay, maybe Joseph dropped. Let's see, maybe one more. Feel free to jump on, just so I can understand that question better. I think we may have gotten through all of them. Okay. Well, hey, thank you guys so much. For anyone that's still on, if anyone wants to hop on video, just say hi real quick. I just want to, yeah, just appreciate y'all for coming out here. Hopefully, was this helpful? Useful? Maybe educational? All right. Hello. Hey, Alexei. Hey, Chung.
So helpful,
Trang.
so useful. Thank you so much, Marty. Happy Friday. Thanks for sharing your time with us.
Yeah. Yeah, that absolutely. And like I said, I hope to do this more. Hopefully once a month, maybe once every other month, because I know there's not everyone can attend, and it'll be on the recording as well. But yeah, really appreciate y'all kind of jumping on and spending this hour and 10 minutes here. So
And for the
Yes,
spreadsheet, will
please,
you
thank you.
send that to us after, or will you drop a link for us?
yeah, ideally, shoot me a message.
And then you'll send it to us. Perfect.
If you can, I'll send it to you. Because I just want to make sure you have to kind of like just make a copy of it, and
Yep.
then you can use it. Otherwise, it gets get a little confusing.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Hey, Matty, just want to hop on and say thank you. This is very educational. Well, I am very new in investing. Like, I'm just planning to buy a house. So thank you for all the ideas.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. Yeah, again, appreciate it. Right. Cool. thank you all, and I will be on for a second here, seeing if I like to usually kind of take the questions here, and then if I missed anything, we can always follow up separately.
Hey, Marty. I did have one question.
Yeah.
Is there a Slack or Chime group where Amazonians who are interested in this kind of communicate or just kind of drop ideas or questions on a regular
Yeah,
basis?
there is. Yeah, normally I have it in my kind of pre-presentation, the presentation for the presentation. But there is. So it's real estate sorry, you can see up here. It's the real estate. So the hashtag real estate and then investing real estate. So those two.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we are good. I'll make sure that there isn't anything because I know once I end this over here, then everything will be lost. So I'll take a quick look if there was any other things here. But I think we got the quip. We got most questions answered. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.